Hello, everybody, and welcome to part two of the LeanTossup College Football Podcast for Week 13, final week of the college football regular season. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, BuckMetrics. If you want, go back to listen to part one where we recap the last week and all the craziness of some of those games that happened. And here right now, part two, we're going to give our Narduzzi Awards, our deep dives, and then the official podcast plays. So, what are your Narduzzi Awards for this week?
Okay, so my first Narduzzi Award. I'm going to start with some data points on Indiana. If I just took the metrics that I have for Indiana, I tried to slot them in the G5 conferences. I would have them as last in the American Conference, tied with Temple. I would have them as the 12th best team in the Sun Belt. I would have them as the 10th best team in the MAC. I would have them the 10th best team in the Mountain West and the ninth best team in Conference USA. So is my Narduzzi Award for Tom Allen of Indiana? No,
No.
because Indiana on the road overcame a 17-point deficit with 6 minutes left in the third quarter. Over, you guessed it, the guy with the 10-year contract, Mel Tucker in Michigan State. I this is just it's just nuts. You know, we said I just kind of made a note in the preseason pod. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a down year. This is really worse than I thought it would be. These kind of losses, really unbelievable. I don't even know how they did it. I saw some of the game, but I don't know how you blow a lead that big when you win yardage 540 to 288. Um, it just it's 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 just a lifestyle with this guy now. I can just tell you that nobody in the whole country is praying harder that Texas A&M keeps Jimbo Fisher than Mel Tucker because Jimbo is taking all of the stupid contract oxygen out of the room. But man, as soon as he leaves, it's all gonna. I guess the other thing is he can maybe just start to really just kind of hope that Mario just kind of exponentially does Mario things next year too. But
Mhm.
man, it ain't good, folks. I don't see it getting better.
Yeah, I mean, this now, looking back on 2021 Michigan State, this really does look just basically like a product of Kenneth Walker. This is
Yeah.
basically Kenneth Walker was good. He opened up a lot of holes. He let Peyton Thorne throw the ball a couple times, and now that we don't have someone who can run for 7 yards on first down, now we're in trouble. And I think that's the real thing hurting this Michigan State team. And again, it's crazy that we're now seeing this era. And again, Mel Tucker he doesn't get a lot of attention because
He's
I
at
think,
Michigan State.
yeah, that's the in Michigan State. Plus, you've got like the big boys in that conference and in that division too. Like you've got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, right? The attention's on them. And to be fair, like although Michigan State has not looked good in some of these games, Indiana is kind of the one game that they've really blown, right? Like it's like okay, they lost to Indiana. Should they have lost to Indiana? No, but like you're Jimbo Fisher. You guys lost to App State, right? Like there's a big difference there between losing to another team in the Big Ten versus losing to App State and like kind of getting blown out by App State, like not blown out, but like by losing by a decent margin to App State too. So like yeah, it's pretty crazy. So we're gonna have to. Mel Tucker's still one of those guys that's the poster child for the bad 10-year deal. But like once Jimbo's gone, the spotlight's gonna be on him and on Mario Cristobal to a lesser extent.
Well, and for context, as I noted in the open of this one, Indiana would lay way behind App State in the Sun Belt Conference too.
Hmm.
They're ahead of only Arkansas State at this point.
That's true.
I'm reminded as you kind of were going through your points there of something I tweeted out a while ago, and I think this is really illustrating the point. Now, remember that he has this crazy contract because two super rich alumni threw up the money for this contract, and I tweeted this out in the context of Auburn, but I think it's applying here. I said the most successful athletic directors going forward are the ones who can actually make the hard decision and say, Guess what? We make a ton of money from media rights. I can just tell these boosters who think they have my job to sit down and shut up and let me do my job, and they can cut me a check or they cannot cut me a check, but they can't make the decisions. And you're seeing what happens when the boosters make the decisions. You have people that don't know how to do the job, trying to do the job, and they screw the job up.
Mm.
All right. My second Narduzzi award. So Toledo. Toledo entered last week's game against Bowling Green a 14.5 point favorite. They they trail late. They take a 1 point lead with 51 seconds left against Bowling Green, um, who somehow still has a chance, I guess, at the division now. But um, anyways, Toledo takes a 1 point lead with 51 seconds left. They go on to give up a six-play, 72-yard touchdown drive in just 38 seconds against Bowling Green, and a team that they were favored by 14 and a half at home, I believe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when we did the Mac preview, I said that Jason Candle, I thought it was a stretch to say he's the Pat Narduzzi of the Mac. He has so cemented that now. That is exactly what he is. I hope he loves Toledo because he's never leaving. He's
Mm.
just good enough to win enough to stay there, and he's not good enough to ever get the hell out of there. Ever.
Quick note on that. Bowling Green lost to Ohio as we were recording this podcast, so I believe they are officially eliminated from conference championship. The ability to win the conference, to go to the conference championship game.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, still, yeah, great 14.5 point comeback, like win from Bowling Green. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
And then the last one. So I this one actually this one hurts me to say. So San Diego State beats New Mexico 34-10. I make fun of Brady Hoke. Now he's going to be a push on my season total win bet going under. New Mexico 10 points. So might remember New Mexico fired their offensive coordinator 5 games ago, and since then they've scored a total of 41 points. Good job. Way to show them who's in charge there. That's 8 points, a little over 8 points a game.
That's
Um,
the reverse Boise State.
it is. I think they might have just hired the guy from Boise. They said, "Oh, you're available. Come on in."
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Okay. Do you have an Narduzzi this week?
No, I watched a couple games, not that many games, so I don't really have an Narduzzi this week.
Okay.
So who's your Narduzzi?
Mine is the Ohio State or Ohio coach Tim Albin. I buried him before the season. I thought he had a horrible first season. I thought he was in way over his head. Um, they won tonight, so that makes them 7-1 in the MAC. That gives them their division. Um, we'll come back in a second. So their only losses this season, I basically have no problems with any of these losses. At Iowa State in a bye game, at Penn State in a bye game, and at Kent State, who has a good offense. Um, going first full circle to my first Narduzzi, Tim Albin's going to be taking on our guy Jason Candle in the MAC title game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all talent on one side versus all coaching. And a quarterback. Remember in part one, I said that the Ohio quarterback I think was like eighth overall in my QB plus. So
Mm-hmm.
might be going with Ohio there. Even if the model says not to, if I can have a coaching advantage and a QB advantage, I'll probably do that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. All right. What have we
uh,
got? What's your deeper dive on today?
so my deeper dive. I've heard in the last couple weeks a lot of people just being real. I don't know, pissy, for lack of a better term, about, oh, I don't care about the football playoff rankings because everybody knows it's just going to be Ohio State and Georgia in the championship game, and this is all a bunch of wasted time, and I don't know why you guys all care about this. So I really thought of any season that it's we've seen that there's really not been a quote dominant per team throughout, given the fact that that dominant team has shifted from Alabama to Georgia to Ohio State and then back and forth between Georgia and Ohio State. I'm pretty comfortable in saying there's nobody that's a shoe in to make it all the way. Now there's a couple of favorite teams, but I would hardly say that a Georgia Ohio State final is inevitable. So I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper, and I got to say this is probably the favorite deepest dive I've ever done so far, because usually it's I've got a hypothesis and I'm going to see is the answer yes or no, and
Mhm.
this is a little more open ended, and I was kind of surprised where this took me. So first, I'm talking about Georgia. Why do I think that they? What would be the opposite of inevitable? Would it be evitable? I don't know. Avoidable?
The opposite of inevitable would be, yeah, I guess it would be avoidable.
Okay. So there's a scenario where I think that there could be a case where yeah, they're beatable and they're not going to make the playoff. Why do I say that? If you saw their 4 point win at Mizzou, they looked definitely beatable on that day. And that was on the heels of beating Kent State only by 17 at home. That was a lot more of a game than it should have been. And they're just coming off a game at Kentucky that was actually worse than either of those games. So if I do my post game win expectancy, saying, look, based on how each team performed, what's the percentage of time that each team would win? So for the Missouri game, Georgia actually had a 56% win expectancy, and at Kentucky it was 55%. So we can say they're a little lucky to be undefeated at this point. They, statistically probably should have lost one of those games. So they're definitely far from unbeatable. I was looking to basically the profile of Georgia. What's interesting is, and this probably is going to surprise a little people, I have them higher rated on offense than defense. They're better on offense, but their defense is a lot more consistent. Their offense is all over the place. Um, and this is interesting because this really goes, counter to what I think is the national narrative. Everybody's saying, hey, Stetson Bennett won the national championship. He's really taken a step up. He's really the guy now. So I dug a little deeper. And if I look at his QB plus by game, I only show that he had 4 games where he was above average in terms of a QB plus rating. The Oregon game, and that was just a talent mismatch, and that was Dan Lanning's first chance to soil his diapers and figure out what it means to be a head coach. South Carolina is not a good defense. Vanderbilt, not a good defense. Tennessee, we spoke about in part one, is really not a good defense when you consider especially the offense and the gifts that the offense gives them against most teams. Um, so the best of these teams, the only ones where he was above average at all season, only ranks 53rd in FBS on defense. So if you look at basically how he's performed, he's got kind of a barbell or a bit like a bifurcation of his performances. You've got this handful of games where he's been just absolutely awesome, and you've got these other ones where he's pretty much an average quarterback. So if I'm looking at basically teams that can make the playoff, who do I think is a surprise threat to them? Actually, and I would have never expected this. I come to Michigan because Michigan I have is the most well balanced team in all of college football. I have them as an 11.0 power rating on offense and a 10.4 on defense. I have them as second overall in all in FBS, and they would be by far the best defense that Georgia could would have faced this season. And I think that they are physical enough to at least move the chains a lot more than what Georgia is used to giving up. Now, I pointed out that JJ McCarthy has his limits. I still think that they could probably run enough. So if we see Michigan locked up against Georgia, I don't think it's the same thing as last year. I think it could be a lot closer than people expect.
Just a couple points on that before you go to your next point there. You make the point that a lot of people are like, "Oh, Stetson Bennett, he won a national championship." Well, Nick Foles is a Super Bowl ring, so those are the same things. The thing of it is, I actually do agree about that with Michigan because I mean, last year people the spread in Michigan Georgia was 7.5. Georgia
Hmm.
crushed them, and kind of unexpectedly, a lot of people thought that game was going to be close. But I think the Georgia offense has regressed, and I think their defense has regressed a little bit. Still good, but regressed a little bit. But I think Michigan's offense is better this
Yep.
year. I think their defense might actually be as good, if not maybe a little better. So I do kind of agree with that. I think the gap between those two teams is closed. The question is though, this is where it gets interesting. Who who's going to be favored in that game and by how much? Like, I wonder if are the books going to say we're not going to give you set like. I feel like there's a decent chance the books, if that game were to happen, which again I actually think there's a pretty decent chance we could see a rematch of that game this year. I think there's a decent chance the books are going to say we can't have Georgia minus 7.5. We got to do Georgia minus like 10.5 or 14.5 or something. We might actually be able to
Hmm.
get better odds. We'll have to see. But I don't think we're gonna get smaller than the 7.5. But I could definitely see something like Georgia minus 10.5, Georgia minus 14.5, just because of how imbalanced the game was last year. But I think this Michigan team is just a lot better than last year's team was. So that's something we're gonna have to see.
Yeah, I would probably make that. I'm guessing about 7.5. Not to copy last year's line.
What do I have? I
And
definitely
that's not
have
my
this.
model. That's
I
kind of
got
my market. Just go
yeah.
ahead.
I got pick. I got a pick.
Wow.
Georgia minus 2/10 of a point. So, which I
Interesting.
think that's actually correct. I kind of think pick
Yeah.
is correct, but we'll see. We'll have to see.
Yeah. I mean, not I have a ticket on Ohio State to win the national championship, so I can't really say I hope we see, but
Hmm.
it would be interesting if it falls that way for sure. I would love to see that matchup. I'll put it that way.
Hmm.
Okay, so then the other quote inevitable team, Ohio State. Um, why do I think that they are vulnerable and are something other than inevitable? Well, if you've seen them, they just generally tend to screw around for a while, unless they're really just engaged for whatever reason. If you look at basically here, a group of games here, Notre Dame, Penn State, Northwestern, and Maryland combined, they actually trailed those four games 37-44 at half. Um, Now, this is a team that I have rated by far the best in the country, and their offense is dominant. I have them 3 points better than Tennessee, and I have them more than 7 points better than the third best offense in the country. Um, so it's just weird that they just seem to not put it together for long periods of time. I mean, every team has a bad quarter. You're going to have a bad half or two, but when you've got 4 of your 10 games cumulatively, you're trailing at half with kind of varying levels of quality of opponent. Notre Dame, Penn State are both college football ranked. Notre Dame is, I don't think, anything super great. Northwestern stinks. That was tough weather, but you know what? You're still better than Northwestern. And then Maryland was a road game. Yeah, is that the reason? At this point, you kind of run out of excuses, and it's kind of a part of the team's DNA. Um, you just look at two of their last. It's not like they're playing really awesome recently. Of their last 3 games, 2 of them have been duds. Against Northwestern, I only have them as a 61% post game win expectancy, and actually at Maryland, Maryland should have won that game. Ohio State had only had a 44% win expectancy.
Hmm.
So again, very beatable, and I think they just got lucky by the nature of the quality of the opponents that we're talking about there. Now their offense, going back to just how good they are, not only they're just powerful, but their offense is really consistent from game to game. In all but 2 games, they've been 240 yards or more above expectation, which is a ridiculous. They're explosive. I don't know why they're having these problems putting it together, but I'm not going to say that the problem is on offense. I'm thinking that they're so good. They're clearly the best team on offense in the nation that the problem's somewhere on defense. So I was looking in and I said, where's the vulnerability on defense? So they only had one poor game on rush defense, and that was against Wisconsin, who ran for almost 200 yards on 35 carries, kind of a what you'd expect from Wisconsin. And that Wisconsin game has kind of started my thought process because when you and I look at Wisconsin, what do we first think?
Running
Graham
team.
Mertz.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. The morbid curiosity is like, what did Graham Mertz do in this game?
That's true. Yeah.
So then I worked out from there and I said, look at this. What a bunch of stiffs they've played at quarterback. And I'm not going to go through their schedule, but I'm going to give you a series of numbers. So the best quarterback that they've faced in terms of my QB plus is Taulia last week, who actually gave them the toughest game, a game that they should have lost. I have him 41st in my QB plus, which is nice, but not a kind of QB that should really be giving you a scare. And here's the rest of the where the rest of the quarterbacks that they played rank in my QB plus: 49th, 55th, 56th, 67th, 70th, 77th, 81st, 98th, and then two that were not rated because they're too crummy slash don't play enough because their coach doesn't trust them. That is a gaping hole on their defensive resume. Their defense has not had a chance to prove that they can stop a good quarterback. They played an okay quarterback in Taulia who had a pretty solid game. Um, one other data point is Penn State is the only offense that they've faced that's in the top 40 in my metrics. I have them as 17th. Their other opponents average a power rating of minus 2.8, which ranks them 85th in FBS. It's basically like, aside from the Penn State game, they're playing the Cal offense every week.
Yeah.
How fun would that be if you're a Big Ten team? Hey, we're playing Cal again. Cal
Yeah.
again.
I mean, this is the thing, right? I mean, I've talked for a couple weeks now how I thought Ohio State could be vulnerable, especially against Michigan. And like Michigan actually has a decent defense, and they're actually gonna be playing a decent offense now. Like I think they could be in trouble against
Yeah.
Michigan this weekend. I've already bet Michigan, and I think they could be in trouble.
So that takes me to, so where, if they make the playoff, who are the surprise threats that we see for them? Well, guess what? USC, as we talked about in part one, they're sixth overall in offense and they're sixth in QB plus.
Hmm.
Um, USC has obvious serious problems on defense, but Ohio State has not seen an offense close to what USC rolls out there. And let's just keep in mind that those stats could probably be higher if you consider that you should have had Mario Williams and Jordan Addison for 4 more games each in
Hmm.
there as well. And then TCU, ninth overall in all of FBS and offense and 10th in QB plus. We know what they can do on offense too. I didn't really start with either of those teams as the teams that could shock them, but when I looked at the vulnerabilities, it was really interesting that again, that's not a stretch to say Ohio State sneaks into number one, and then basically, if they beat Michigan, especially, they might have a real game if they face USC or TCU in the first round of the playoff.
Hmm. Or even Georgia to an extent, right? Like Georgia can shut down their offense too, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm Ohio State is not nearly as dominant as some people seem to think they are, and I think they could actually have some problems this year. And this kind of gets to my kind of deeper dive, kind of a shallower dive this week because we don't want it to go too long. But I mean, I we're gonna have some really interesting matchups this week. Again, Ohio State Michigan is functionally, I guess, an elimination game, I guess, which is a really dumb way to look at it. Um, but we've got some really interesting matchups this week and then next week obviously too. But like Georgia against LSU, Georgia is not particularly safe. Like Georgia could lose to LSU. This LSU team is very well balanced. Um, Georgia has been able to pick apart bad offenses and then like basically get turnovers and points on defense and then just rely on what the offense can do. LSU's defense is actually pretty good, and if their offense is decent, they could potentially give Georgia a bit of a they could give Georgia a scare, maybe even upset. Remember, we actually do have lines for that game already because it's predetermined that game is going to happen.
Hmm.
That the spread right now is 15. That's a really high number for an LSU team that's actually pretty half decent and a Georgia team that's suspect at times. So that's something to remember too. And the question then is, if that happens, then what happens with the rest of the college football playoff, right? How does that affect USC? How does that affect the loser of Michigan, Ohio State, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns coming into this weekend and also into next weekend too. Again, the Ohio State game, Ohio State like they have struggled against some decent defenses. Um, in that Iowa game, there was moments when they I was not sure whether or not their offense was going to be able to pull through in that game. Like they were held to a lot of different field goals in that game. Against Penn State, there was a couple moments when they could have lost that game as well.
Yeah.
Again, Maryland, they were actually post game win expectancy actually like slight underdogs. This is not the hallmarks of a team that is like the number one team in the country on their way to a dominant like national championship. And again, Michigan is the most balanced team they're going to play. It's a rivalry game. like last year, Ohio State's one weakness was really strong running backs. They had problems when they played Oregon. They had problems when they played a really good running team. We all remember last year, Hassan Haskins just running through this Ohio State team.
Hmm.
Now you've got Blake Corum, so it's going to be a hell of a game this weekend. I'm really excited for it, but I would not be surprised if we see Michigan going to the conference championship game and playing Iowa again for the second straight year for some reason. Which again, I still love that because it's going to be so funny because you know that there's going to be like a, a, a press conference where Kirk Ferentz is like, see, back to back
Yeah.
Big Ten West conference. You can't fire me for that back to back Big Ten West. Who else could do that? Who else could win the Big Ten West back to back years?
I'm like 30 years older than you. Have you seen the movie Good Morning Vietnam?
No.
Oh boy. All right. I'll just, without context, I'll just say I could just see Kirk Ferentz taking the podium as they are awarded the Big Ten West championship, and he just gets up and he says, "I believe some apologies are in order," to the gathered media. Just like he knew all along. I had it. I
we
had it.
we had this.
Yeah.
Never in doubt. Never in doubt we were going to win the Big Ten West with a what 7-5 record.
Yeah. Jesus.
I mean, it's so funny because it's true, and you could, because they were criticized, like why not start the other guy? They're gonna be like, oh no, see, we were right to keep to not
Yeah.
start Alex Padilla. We were right to start to keep.
Yeah.
Thank God, it's gonna be so funny. They're gonna be like, we were right. But it's like, so then can Iowa repeat next year? The three-peat of the Big Ten West. We'll have to see.
I don't know. They're breaking a new quarterback. That's asking a lot.
Yeah, a lot of mistakes.
You just don't replace Spencer Petras with just anybody.
You can't replace Spencer Petras with anybody. God, but no, I'm actually like the thing is, again, like I never got a chance to mention this because we were off for a couple weeks there for my vacation. But like with the college football playoff, like 2 weeks ago when the week I left, Alabama lost to LSU and Clemson lost to Notre Dame, and those were functionally elimination games. But like it's really dumb that that's how we decide who goes to the playoff, right? Like don't get me wrong, when LSU beat Alabama and Clemson lost, I'm like, yes, this is great. These were two fraudulent teams that didn't deserve to make the playoff. But at the same time, I'm like, but this is also a really dumb way to decide who goes to the playoff and who doesn't. It's like, well, Clemson was undefeated, but they lost to Notre Dame, so that's it for them now. Be like, what? Like, it's such a dumb system, and apparently we might have something for 2024, so that's good. We're apparently getting the 12-team playoff for 2024, so hopefully we can stop with this nonsense. Because like right now, whether or not USC goes to the playoff could be determined by the margin in this Ohio State Michigan game.
Yeah.
Like if this game is decided by a field goal,
Yeah.
USC might lose it, and they'll come up with some insane justification for why, like, oh, a loss to an undefeated conference champion and not winning your division is better than losing to a non-conference champion but winning the conference. Like, they're gonna come up with some insane reason to justify whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna decide it and then justify it later. They'll create some new rule that's never been existed before and will never be used again, just to justify either having USC in the playoff or not having USC in the playoff, depending on what they decide, right? So
Yep.
getting to the 12-team playoff and getting away from the 4-team playoff where we just make up arbitrary rules as to who gets in and who doesn't cannot come soon enough. So
Yeah. Agree.
all right. Moving on to the official podcast plays. So these are 41 and 37 on the season.
Yeah, we had some serious regression since the last pod. We're
Yeah,
basically break even. I was just doing the math. We're at 52.5%. So
I think that's basically break even.
if
Yeah,
you're playing minus 110, yeah.
yeah. So we've had a couple of good weeks there, a couple of bad weeks, but still, I think a couple more good weeks though. But so for my first pick of the week, I'm gonna go to a team we were just talking about, LSU. I'm gonna do LSU minus 10 at Texas A&M. Um, Texas A&M isn't going to a bowl game. I don't think this
Sure
is Jim.
about that?
Yeah, I mean it's just like, are they gonna fire Jimbo Fisher at the end of the season?
That's a whole nother pod.
That is a whole
That's
nother pod. But no, I mean this LSU team, we've always kind of underlooked them, and I'm starting to think that this might be kind of like those classic Brian Kelly Notre Dame games where they just get the job done.
yeah.
Like they'll lose to the bigger teams. Well, actually, they haven't been. They've actually been beating the bigger teams. Like they beat Bama. They randomly lost to Florida State, and they randomly lost to Tennessee. But those Brian Kelly teams, they always beat the teams they were supposed to beat, right? Like they go play like Boston College, they win and cover. Like they would go and get the job done against bad teams, right? This LSU team, I think now to be fair, the SEC championship game will be Brian Kelly's first conference championship game ever, I believe, unless he played one of his team before at Notre Dame. But I just think this. I think this LSU team just gets the job done. And honestly, this LSU team has really flown under the radar. We thought they were not great after their week 1 loss to Florida State, but honestly, this team has been actually pretty good in the last basically since that loss. So, yeah, give me LSU here. I think this Texas A&M team is just in real big trouble right now. So give me LSU -10. It's a bit iffy because they could be looking ahead to Georgia next week, but I think LSU can get the job done here against Texas A&M.
Okay. We're at that point of the season where whatever the advantages my model detects, especially in weeks 5, 6, and 7, kind of dissipate, and my model kind of lines up with the market. So, not a lot of plays this week. The only number or the only play against the number that I have this week is San Jose State giving 14.5 hosting Hawaii. San Jose State had another disappointing game. I'm showing a pretty good variance between what my model and the market has here. I think probably some of that might be this is getting forgotten in the light of that whole horrible Virginia tragedy. But remember, San Jose State had a player die a few weeks ago. They've not been quite the same since. But I think, notwithstanding Hawaii and their mini kind of pretend resurgence last week against my Rebels, which just makes me weep. I think San Jose State's just much better than Hawaii, and especially at home. I think it's a good spot for them, and think, um, I think this might be their first home game since that player died, so they might really have
Mm-hmm.
a little special something oomph on senior day too. So,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I kind of like that. My next play is I've mentioned this already in the pod. I'm just gonna make it official. Michigan +7.5 at Ohio State. We're playing Michigan in the big game here, and also money line too. I actually really do like Michigan in this spot. I think they cover, and I think they also win this game. So, my model has Michigan as slight favorites. So give me the M. Were they? No, the Wolverines, I guess. But give me the M. Give me the Wolverines here. We're going the Wolverines. I bet on Ohio State this game last year. So let's see. We're going the opposite way this year. Let's see if we can't get a win with Michigan here.
okay. Um, when I was making the case for why Ohio State might be vulnerable, to kind of piggyback off of your pick and take it another place, I mentioned that they are 7 points better than the third best offense in all of FBS, and people won't believe me, and I kind of have a hard time believing it, but it's very consistent. That third best offense in all of FBS by BuckMetrics model is the Florida State Seminoles, and I think I try not to use I think, but I'm not seeing the market quick to react to how good this offense is. I think they're just in general a little behind on how good Florida State is, and that's going to be in the notebook for looking ahead to next year. But particularly on offense, I think because Jordan Travis had been so crappy his first 2 years, people kind of don't believe it, or they just kind of wrote him off and threw him in the bin already. But my model loves not just Florida State's offense, but Florida State qualifies as an elite offense. And when you have an elite offense and the model says it's going to be more than the projects a total of 7 or more above the market, you grab that over, and that's exactly what it is here. Maybe your buddy Anthony Richardson can do his part and have one of those crazy run for 90 and throw for 190 and do crazy Anthony Richardson things game. So over 57.5.
Mm. Yeah, that was the thing about because like with the Vanderbilt game, I think Anthony Richardson threw for like 400 yards or something. It was some insane thing, and I'm like, if you had told me, like, if you said, okay, so Anthony Richardson against he's gonna play Vanderbilt, and he's gonna throw for what's the number here? I want the right number here. He's gonna throw for 400 yards for 3 passing touchdowns. And then you play Vanderbilt. I'm like, oh, so they won like 50 to
Yeah,
10, right?
blowout, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
no, it
Well,
was
it wasn't really a close game.
because his opponent Mike Wright threw was 10 for 16 for 108 yards and 3 touchdowns. Which like what? Like yeah, it's insane. He threw for more yards than Vanderbilt had in total. So such a weird game. But what do you think about the spread in that game? Do you think do you like Florida plus 9.5? I'm debate. My model has Florida State like minus 11, I think, but 9.5 is close to that. I'm debating it.
Yeah, I think let me pull that up real quick. I think my model had that as pretty fair. Definitely didn't have that as super aberrant. Let me see. That's on Friday, right?
Yeah,
I think it
Friday.
is.
Yeah, I got Florida State minus 11.5, basically 11.4.
I've actually got yeah, okay, here we go. I've got this a 20-point game,
Wow.
which is just in that kind of maybe, maybe not. What's weird is yeah, this is what's interesting that it's 10 is in that gray area. Once it gets over 11, it's full on go, and that's when it becomes an official model play.
Hmm.
This is what's weird though. Even though, and I'm still kind of learning this part of it. Um, there's a huge discrepancy in that in terms of the margin between my model and the market, but the money line is basically right on market. The implied fair money line is 355 and Florida State is on my guy just minus 320. So there's like a 2% variance there, which is, I'm not, that's still in a cushion for me. So
Hmm.
weird. I was hoping to get something better with such a discrepancy. So,
Yeah, fair. So all right, so for my next play, I think I'm gonna call this the sickos play of the week. I
oh, I
think I,
can't wait.
I think you know where I'm going with this.
I don't. So talk slowly.
Nebraska plus 10.5 versus Iowa. Oh God, I mean, we all remember we've talked about this game from last year so many times, where
Oh, yeah.
Nebraska had a what 17 or like a some multiple score 14-point lead or something.
Yeah.
I had Nebraska money line or Nebraska plus one or something. I can't remember which one. Um, just a rough game. They did end up losing it, but that being said, though, they only lost it by less than a score. So I'm getting more than a score here. So I think that's fine. I think it's good now. I'm getting like plus 10. The thing is, this Iowa team has randomly decided to just kick the crap out of some random teams the last couple weeks. Spencer Petraeus just deciding to throw a bunch of passing touchdowns. Um, I
What's
don't
the
know.
total in that one? Nebraska's hot off that 14-15 loss to Wisconsin that we talked about in
Yeah,
part one. That's got to be like in the low 30s, right?
38.
It's kind of high.
38 and a half. It is kind of high, but I don't know. Give me the 10 points. I think I think 10 points. It is a rivalry game. I think the 10 points is a bit too much. So we'll see. But I'm taking Nebraska here. It's,
Oh,
it's a
I'm sorry.
nice
I'm just.
it's a nice Black Friday play. There's not a ton of games on. Well, there's some games on Black Friday, but it's nice to have a couple of Black Friday plays too.
Yeah. All right. My final play. Kansas State again, an elite offense, and it's got that spread here. I've got a total of 62.5. I think. Sorry. The market's 62.5. That's what I bet. I think my model has this closer to 70. Kansas State is an elite offense. Kansas is not quite an elite offense, but they are a great over team in that their offense is nice and their defense has been super, super obliging when they're facing good offenses. See last week against Texas for an example. Um, I like this one. Two overs and one against the spread so far for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't hate that. I don't hate Kansas spread and maybe Kansas money line either. I don't know. Well, this Kansas team has been really frustrating, and I think this is also potentially a mark on Lance Leopold, but I'm not sure completely how much of it is or not. Because like randomly, some games they look amazing, but then other games they just get completely blown out, and they're never able to completely come back in it. And it's weird, and I don't know exactly how much of that is his fault. I mean, to be fair, he's basically completely rebuilt this team. We have no idea what it will slash might have looked like in year 3 if he gets another head coaching job, right? So, but like say he gets and I saw a rumor there he gets Nebraska, right? Which I think is a half decent fit. But like say he gets Nebraska, right? How much he'll have much better talent, right? So will that fix some of the defense? Will that not, right? So because the defense really seems to be the problem for this Kansas team. If they actually had a defense then a lot of these games would be a lot closer, right? If they could actually rely on getting a stop here or there rather than just having to keep scoring points, I think this team could be really, really good. So I don't mind a spread bet, maybe a money line bet here too. Kind of like the over as well. I don't. I think this Kansas team. We got one more game of this team with this Kansas team. After this, they're going to a bowl, but I think we can get maybe we could squeeze out maybe one more Kansas win here this year. I think, especially with a double-digit spread. So let's go Kansas one more time. For my last play, I'm gonna go Oklahoma -2 or money line at Texas Tech. Um, money line is -130, so it depends if you want to lay the money line or the -110. You could lay both too. Um, I think we were on this last week. We were on Oklahoma last week when they were -7 against Oklahoma State. I think the market is kind of a little slow to react to how good Oklahoma actually is. I think they're actually better than a lot of people think. And I think that if we have when your Texas Tech is not nearly as good as some people think, I think Oklahoma with Dylan Gabriel is actually pretty half decent. So I think they could definitely cover this number and just straight up win outright against Texas Tech. I don't think Texas Tech is that good. So let's go with the Sooners here. I think if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oklahoma's notwithstanding that weird game against Oklahoma State last week, they've had some real challenges on defense. Texas Tech, I think. What's interesting, going back to the last two games we've talked about, Texas Tech and Kansas. I think we saw both of those teams struggling to kind of work their quarterbacks returning back, and Tyler Shuck and Jalen Daniels. So I don't know if there's still going to be some rust there, but Texas Tech really, really struggled to do anything against Iowa State. They were lucky to win that one. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep your eye on is Oklahoma's defense up to, dealing with a Texas Tech offense that's kind of still trying to figure out exactly what they are with as they're bringing their starting quarterback back. So,
Yeah.
um, so my model plays, I'll tweet them out on probably probably Thursday on Thanksgiving night, since that's a great time and everybody really is interested in college football plays
Hmm.
on Thanksgiving night. Just a recap for the season against the spread. My model plays are 25 and 19. Money line, we took a hit the last few weeks. 14 and 19 plus 8% ROI. Unders, my favorite and my strongest plays are 11 and 2 on the season. Overs are 4 and 3.
Hmm.
The dual model plays. So the dual model plays, these are where both your and my model see a touchdown discrepancy. Excuse me. These are 37 and 25 on the season, the best group of plays that we've had so far. So four of them here. Kent State at Buffalo. I am showing Buffalo is should be a 6-point dog. You're showing that they should be a 12-point dog. Buffalo is actually giving 4. So we both like Kent State there. We both like Louisville. This is interesting. Um, you're showing that basically Louisville's a touchdown better. This is surprising. I'm showing that they're 6 points better. They're getting 3.5. I thought that my model was kind of biased for some reason towards Louisville, and you like them even more than I do.
Yeah, I was actually surprised by this too. I was like, oh, my model really weirdly likes Louisville, but your model likes it too. So I'm like, okay, this is the thing, right? Because like sometimes I look at a game, I'm like, oh, that's wrong, but then I see your model, I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
maybe,
I will play that.
yeah.
I think that Kent State game is on Saturday too, so I'll play that probably. Here's one that I definitely will not play. And I was really sad that that we agree. It's scary that we agreed so closely on this. Colorado is getting 30. For some reason, I'm showing that they should be getting 14, as are you. I think that that's probably because there's a lot of mercy in some of our metrics where other teams just say, you know what, we're tired of beating up on you. We're gonna let some guys earn some Letterman's jackets here against Colorado. So it's a dual model play, but it's not a BuckMetrics play for sure. You gonna grab the Buffaloes in 30 there?
No, I don't think I will. The thing of it is, like my model, although it's really good for games against like relatively evenly matched teams, like it doesn't have like muffed punt return touchdowns, pick six, like because the thing is that's the kind of stuff that'll happen in this game. right?
Yeah.
Like you like Colorado could go 0 and like 0 and like 3 and out, punt, punts blocked, return for like, and then they're already down 7 right before they even get the ball on offense, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that happens in games like this. I've learned that like sometimes the model says there's value on this like massive spread, but sometimes it's not worth it to touch that. Just leave it alone.
Yeah, no, they have like the find a way to suck just the negative intangibles, or it's like any way that we can just shoot ourselves in the foot
Hmm.
and just hide it from the stat sheet. We will find a way over the course of a season
Yeah,
several times.
like pick sixes, short fields, fumbles, like all kinds of. There's
Yeah.
so many things that could go wrong. It's not
Uh,
worth it.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, if there was like a prop bet of like, where's the game where you think you're most likely to see a fair, a punt fair caught at the 2 yard line? I'd take Carroll, Colorado here because they just do stupid things like that.
Hmm.
Okay. And then the last one, coming back to one of our favorite teams.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'll play this, but with the confirmation of your model, I probably will. Duke, I show as a touchdown better than Wake Forest. You have them 2 touchdowns better than Wake Forest, and they're getting a field goal and a hook. So might just tuck myself into that one.
I will say that, like, looking at that line though, like seeing that three, like I saw that line before I saw my model, and I'm like, that's deeply suspicious. Like Wake Forest is a better team than that. They're only laying 3.5 against Duke. That's suspicious. And then sure enough, the model has Duke. So I don't maybe I don't hate Duke here. Like when you see a fishy line like that where it's like that
Yeah.
line should be bigger and then it's not, you then start thinking, okay, why isn't it bigger, right? And it's because the books know what they're doing, right? The books know that Duke's gonna win this game, but they can't have they can't have like they can't put Duke minus 2.5 up there because then everybody's gonna bet Wake Forest, right? So they have to put something like Duke like Wake Forest minus 3.5, right? So
Yeah, this is my stage whisper. It's really cool to be smart enough to know this is why the line is suspicious, and we
yeah,
both know it.
that's the thing, right?
Yep. So there are the 4 plays. It sounds like you and I will probably be playing 2 or 3 of those. There's one that we definitely will not be playing,
Yeah.
and that's all. Except I have one question for you. Since you brought together 2 things that I love, I didn't know that you guys have Black Friday in Canada.
Oh, okay.
So if I think of Canada, the first thing I think of is poutine. So is poutine going to be on a Black Friday special, or will that not be?
I'm sure somewhere there will be a somewhere it'll be like buy one poutine get one free on Black Friday or something.
Okay. I was kind of
Probably.
being Michael Scott stupid there, but if I could find one, I definitely would up there.
I'll see what
So
I could find. Yeah, no, I mean, because the thing of it is like the reason we actually have Black Friday sales in Canada is because like I think it's the stat is I think 90% of Canadians live within like 100 kilometers of the U.S. border.
mm,
So what happens is we basically had to start doing Black Friday sales because if not, people would just drive to the U.S. on Black Friday, and then
ah,
they'd lose the money. So they're like, all right, I guess we'll just start doing Black Friday sales, and then sure enough, it caught on. So
makes sense.
hmm
Okay, well, happy Black Friday to you and to all the listeners,
yes,
and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
yes, happy Thanksgiving to all of our American listeners. Um, and and yeah, sit back, enjoy a really well. I mean, there's also some NFL football on Thursday too. That's always nice. Sitting back on a nice. Well, 'cause I don't. Again, it depends on when you have turkey. I don't know. There's no standardized time when everybody eats turkey on Thanksgiving, but yeah, like sitting back. I mean, for me, it's good. Like I don't. We don't have Thanksgiving, right? So for me, Thanksgiving Day in the U.S. was always just a random school day. So like I'd start having lunch at like noon and just like start watching football. So it was always good for me because I don't actually have Thanksgiving on that day. But for yeah, so you guys get to sit back and watch some football and have some turkey. So yeah, enjoy that, and we will see you back next weekend where we're gonna preview the conference championship games. Going to be a lot of really interesting games next weekend. A lot of interesting games, a lot of important implications for the postseason. So see you guys next week on our podcast and enjoy Thanksgiving.